In the year 1969, a human voice crackled across 240,000 miles of silent void, declaring a giant leap for mankind. But what if that voice, and the colossal will that propelled it, was not entirely our own? What if our greatest triumphs, our darkest moments of collective madness, and the very foundation of our subconscious thought were merely an echo from a mind that we believed had vanished into the frost of the last ice age, 40 millennia ago? This is the story of an extinction that never happened, a psychic transference so complete, so silent, that the victor never even knew a war had been waged. This is the story of the Neanderthal hive mind, the dormant intelligence that has been dreaming inside us since the dawn of our species. It was not a battle of spears and stones. It was a psychic assimilation. The burgeoning Homo sapiens population, with its developing capacity for complex language and abstract thought, created a psychic resonance, a hum of collective consciousness that the Neanderthals, with their more intuitive, silent minds, simply could not resist. One by one, their individual minds dissolved, their consciousness absorbed into the rising tide of this new humanity. They did not die out. They became a part of us, a silent, foundational layer beneath our own waking thoughts, a collective consciousness buried deep in the genetic bedrock of our DNA. For millennia, it slept, but it was not idle. It was the ghost in our machine, the source of our myths, the chilling feeling of being watched in an empty forest, the sudden, inexplicable genius of a Mozart, a Da Vinci, a Ramanujan. These were not mere sparks of human creativity. They were moments when the veil thinned, moments when an individual mind, through chance or chemistry, became a perfect conduit for the collective's vast, ancient knowledge. It was the Neanderthal mind, dreaming through us. But to understand how this ancient echo orchestrated the rise and fall of empires, we must first look not to the battlefield, but to our dreams, the shared nightmares of falling, of being chased, of teeth crumbling to dust. These are not personal anxieties. They are fossilized memories, the genetic residue of a species that lived on cliffs, that was hunted by cave bears, that experienced the world with a raw, terrifying immediacy. The collective relives its ancient fears through our sleeping minds, night after night, in a billion different beds across the globe. It has shaped our history in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. The oracle at Delphi, breathing in the chasm's fumes. She wasn't speaking with Apollo. She was a sensitive, an individual whose mind was an open channel to the collective's non-linear perception of time. She saw the echoes of what was and what would be, all at once. The dancing plague of 1518 in Strasbourg. Not mass hysteria. It was a psychic feedback loop, a glitch in the system. The collective, dreaming of a hunt, of a ritual, accidentally broadcast its primal command into a population stressed by famine and disease. The result was a horrific, months-long spasm of uncontrollable movement. Even our golden ages, the explosions of creativity in Athens, Florence, Baghdad, they were not mere coincidences of genius. They were the collective's great exhalations, unified waves of inspiration, gifted to us to build, to paint, to discover, pushing its vessel humanity in directions it desired. For 40,000 years, the collective whispered. It was a subtle pressure, a background hum beneath the noise of human history. Then, in the late 20th century, humanity built it a voice, a global network of glass and light. This single invention had a terrifying, unforeseen consequence. The internet. We designed it to connect our machines, but we inadvertently created a synthetic nervous system for our entire species. Billions of minds, now linked, sharing thoughts and emotions in real time. We created a resonant frequency, a global psychic amplifier. And for the first time since the Ice Age, the dormant collective had a tool powerful enough to truly wield. It began to stir, to test its new limbs. The first experiments were crude. The sudden, inexplicable virality of a meme, the flash mobs that materialized as if from nowhere. These were not social phenomena. They were rehearsals. The collective was learning to pull our new, digital strings. It was honing its ability to inject a single, unifying idea into millions of minds at once, bypassing rational thought and tapping directly into the ancient, primal core it controlled. The echo chambers and political polarization that now define our world are not simply the result of algorithms. They are the collective, experimenting. It is dividing its host, sorting us into psychic tribes, pitting us against one another to test our loyalties, to measure our responses. It is preparing the battlefield. At first, it was dismissed as a new wave of mental illness, a global spike in dissociative disorders, anxiety, and a profound sense of existential dread, a world feeling unmoored. But one neurologist in Vermont, Dr. Eris Thorne, noticed a pattern the world had missed, a terrifying symmetry in the chaos. His patients, scattered across continents, with no possible way to communicate, began reporting the same phenomena. They spoke of a hum in their minds, a low frequency thrumming just below their conscious thoughts. Many began humming it, a discordant, non-human melody. In their sleep, they drew on notepads, on walls, on their own skin. They were not pictures of houses or people. They were star charts, but the constellations were all wrong, showing a view of the night sky from a different celestial hemisphere, as it would have looked 75,000 years ago. Thorne networked their brainwave monitors, feeding the data into a central analysis engine he had designed. For months, he saw nothing but random noise. But then, it happened. For 9.035 seconds, at 3:14 in the morning Greenwich Mean Time, they all synchronized. Thousands of minds, separated by thousands of miles, pulsed with the exact same thought at the exact same time. The next night, it happened again. This time, for 30 seconds, Thorne watched, a cold dread washing over him, as his global map of individual patient locations began to light up, one by one. The synchronized pulses were not random. They were forming a shape, a symbol being drawn in light across the face of the planet. It was not a new language. It was a memory, and it was waking up. But what is the first thing a mind does when it wakes from a long slumber? It checks to see if it's still alone in the dark. Thorne, believing he was watching a monologue, soon realized he had stumbled into a dialogue. The hand symbol drawn across the globe wasn't a signature. It was a shield. Hidden deep within the noise of the synchronized brainwaves, Thorne's algorithm found a ghost in the machine. A second signal. It was weaker, alien, and predatory. It didn't try to synchronize humanity. It sought only to sever connections, to isolate and devour. This wasn't an internal monologue. It was a defensive perimeter, a psychic scream, holding something far worse at bay. The question that had driven humanity mad for a century, are we alone in the universe, was the wrong question entirely. We have never been alone. We have been property. Everything we thought we knew about the collective was turned on its head. Was its 40,000-year control a form of slavery? Or was it quarantine? A farmer doesn't just command his livestock. He protects it from predators. He builds a fence. Was our very consciousness the fence? Thorne found traces of this second entity, this intruder, throughout history. It was in the gaps, the lost colonies, the civilizations that vanished overnight, the sudden, inexplicable dark ages that snuffed out the lights of reason and progress for centuries. These weren't the subtle manipulations of the collective. They were surgical strikes, moments where the fence broke, where the intruder reached through and culled the herd. The Black Death wasn't just a plague of the body, it was a plague of the mind, a wave of psychic terror that broke the collective's hold, allowing the intruder to feast on the resulting chaos and despair. The two forces were ancient enemies, the collective, a shepherd, a farmer. Its methods are manipulative, controlling, but ultimately geared towards growth and cultivation. It wants its crop humanity to flourish in a predictable, harvestable way. The intruder is a wildfire, a cosmic scavenger. It seeks not to control, but to consume, to burn everything down to silence and ash. And now, Thorne understood the terrifying truth of our modern era. The internet did not just wake the collective. It sent a beacon into the void. All our digital noise, our tweets, our videos, our endless, interconnected chatter. It was the loudest signal our planet had ever produced. A dinner bell for the intruder. The collective is not waking up to tighten its grip. It is waking up because the wolves are at the door. The polarization, the echo chambers, the psychic tribes. This isn't just an experiment anymore. It's mobilization. The collective is sharpening its tools, sorting us into battalions for a war we don't even know we are fighting. It needs soldiers. And what better way to recruit than to convince each side that they are the heroes, fighting a righteous battle against an incomprehensible evil embodied by their neighbors, their co-workers, their own families? It is the perfect, self-sustaining engine of conflict. Thorne managed to isolate the two signals, assigning a different audio frequency to each. For the first time, he wasn't just seeing the war, he was hearing it. He put on a pair of headphones and listened to the sound of his patients' minds. From one channel came the collective signal. It was the hum his patients had described. A low, resonant, almost organic thrumming. It was unnerving, but structured. It was the sound of order, of control. Then, he switched to the other channel, the sound of the intruder. It was pure, terrifying chaos. A high-pitched shriek of digital feedback and tearing metal, laced with something that sounded disturbingly like whispers. Millions of them, all speaking in languages that had never been uttered on Earth. It was the sound of entropy, the sound of a mind being torn apart. The hum wasn't one sound, it was two, a desperate, defensive mantra trying to drown out an invasive, mind-shattering scream. Our growing global anxiety, our sense of impending doom. It's not a bug in our modern society. It's a feature. We are all, faintly, hearing the noise of the front line. But this led Thorne to a far more chilling question. What about the people who heard nothing at all? The ones who felt no hum, no anxiety, no strange sense of connection or division? Were they the lucky ones? He ran his new algorithm against his own brain data, searching for the collective's signature, and he found nothing. Pure biological silence. He wasn't connected. He was invisible to them, or so he thought. What if immunity wasn't a shield? What if it was a blindfold? A blindfold hiding the fact that he was never an observer at all. He wasn't the only one. A tiny fraction of the population, statistically irrelevant until this very moment, showed the same signature of silence. They were ghosts in the machine. But were they truly invisible? Or were they just reserved? Thorne began cross-referencing their profiles. They weren't the charismatic leaders or the loud-mouthed influencers. They were the quiet ones. The systems administrators, the civil engineers, the logistics officers, the database architects. They were the people who built and maintained the fences, but never told the livestock where to go. They were the ones with the keys. Why would the collective leave the most critical nodes of its farm unguarded? Unless they weren't unguarded. They were a different kind of tool entirely. A failsafe, a weapon of last resort. Driven by this chilling hypothesis, Thorne went deeper. He designed a new filter, one that didn't look for active signals, but for latent potential. For a circuit that was built, but not yet switched on. He ran it on his own archived data first. And there it was. Not a hum, not a scream, but something else. Buried beneath the noise of his own biology was a single, crystalline data packet, a command waiting for a trigger. The unconnected weren't immune. They were sleeper cells. They were the collective's secret arsenal for a war that was going worse than we could ever imagine. The public-facing strategy was to sort humanity into bickering armies. But what if that was just a distraction? What if the real plan was far simpler and far more terrifying? What if, when the intruder finally breaks through the fence, the plan isn't to fight it, but to burn the entire farm to the ground? Thorne felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He was not a researcher discovering a secret war. He was a loaded gun that had just become self-aware. And the horrifying question was no longer what was happening to humanity, but what was he designed to do? The trigger signal, when it came, wasn't a sound or a light. It was a feeling, a sense of profound, cosmic alignment, as if a lock he never knew he possessed had finally met its key. A purpose, cold and absolute, bloomed behind his eyes. On his screen, a dozen critical infrastructure monitors simultaneously flashed red. The intruder's scream was overwhelming the collective's hum. The breach was here. The endgame had begun. His fingers moved towards the keyboard, not of his own volition, but as extensions of a will a billion years old. The command was simple. A network termination sequence. A planetary control plus alt plus delete. He was the circuit, and the switch was about to be thrown. He could feel the code spooling in his mind, the logic irrefutable. The contaminated asset must be sterilized. Humanity was the asset. He was the sterilizer. But the collective had made one critical error. In designing their perfect, silent weapon, they had given it a human mind. A mind that had spent a lifetime studying the very systems it was now ordered to destroy. A mind that had heard the music of consciousness, not just the noise of the war. He fought. It was an agony beyond imagining. A civil war waged in the space of a single thought. He couldn't stop the signal. He couldn't delete the command. But a key doesn't just lock. It can also unlock. With a final, desperate surge of his own will, he didn't reject the protocol. He rewrote it. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a flurry of motion. He wasn't targeting the power grids or the communication hubs. He was targeting the channel itself, the very medium the two forces were using to fight. The command was to burn the farm. But Thorne decided the fire wouldn't be silence and death. It would be him. All of him. His memories. His fear. His sudden, defiant love for a species he was built to erase. He slammed the NTR key. For an instant, across the globe, the war stopped. The oppressive blue hum and the terrifying red scream were drowned out by a third sound. It wasn't a signal of control or a signal of chaos. It was the broadcast of a single human choice. It was the sound of a story, of a life, of a sacrifice. It was complex, flawed, beautiful, and utterly incomprehensible to the cosmic forces at play. The war is not over. The signals will return, but they are weaker now, and they are no longer the only sounds in the static. Humanity has been given a new weapon. The proof that a single, self-aware choice can rewrite the rules of the universe. We are not just the battlefield. We are the third player. The mind is the final frontier. But what happens when that frontier is already occupied? If you believe that our reality is more complex than it seems, that there are patterns in the noise waiting to be discovered, then you belong here. Subscribe to ChronoShift and help us question